So I went to all the visa consultants in Karachi and I contacted a lot of visa consultants in other parts of Pakistan as well. And all of them said that your case is too complicated and you will never get a visa. So enjoy your life in Pakistan and forget the UK. So I felt really depressed. All of my friends by now were working in the UK, people who took PLAB one with me. The mistakes I made was I did not explain my case properly. I did not attach a cover letter to my application.
Hello, Success Nation. Today I've got a special guest. My guest today is Dr. Naseer Khan. He is a GP trainee currently working in the Midlands. Would you like to introduce yourself, Naseer?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. So my name is Naseer. I work as a GP trainee. I'm about to finish my first year of GP training now. I'll be in ST2 from August, and I'm working in catering, as you said.
Thanks for making the time today. I really appreciate that. I thought that we'll start with your journey coming to the UK because I understand that you actually had a tough journey. Could you tell me a little bit about that?
You're right. So after passing my PLAB 1, when I was applying for my PLAB 2 visa, I did not have much guidance. So I made a lot of mistakes in my visa application, and my visa was rejected. So I didn't know where to go from there, and I felt a bit low and depressed. So I worked on my visa application and I improved my financial standing, and I waited for a whole year. So I applied for my next visa 12 months later. And again, it was rejected. Um, so my visa was rejected twice by now. And again, I didn't know what to do. PLAB used to be valid for 3 years in the past. So I was lucky there. But I took help from people on Facebook. People who didn't know me at all helped me. They went out of their way to help me. And with their guidance, I applied for my third attempt at the visa. And eventually I did get my visa and came here. So there was a point when I was completely hopeless. I thought I would never come to the UK. And this is why I started career guidance, because I wanted to give hope to other people. I wanted to tell them that anything is possible if you plan properly.
Yeah, I can see that through your blog, Naseer Journey, you have actually detailed your stories and what exactly advice that you give people. So tell me a little bit about the first time when you applied then. What sort of things that you were not aware of and that caused you to have this first rejection?
So when I applied for the visa, I didn't know anything. It was a completely new and foreign thing for me. The mistakes I made was I did not explain my case properly. I did not attach a cover letter to my application, and I just did not give enough information in my application to let the entry clearance officer make a decision in my favor.
So just to clarify, that was an application for you to be able to come to the UK and do the PLAB too?
That's right, yes.
And in the second time that you actually applied for the visa and that's it. So what happened?
So I think that was a good application. I by now I had enough money to sponsor my own trip. I applied through a visa consultant, and I thought that this guy was a professional, so I decided to trust him blindly. And I think he did build a good application. I think the only thing I would have done differently was attached a cover letter, and he felt there was no need for a cover letter. So the application went through without a cover letter. Again, I think because of that, I did not explain my case properly. And again, it was rejected because the entry clearance officer felt that my circumstances had not changed, even though they had changed a lot. But maybe they did not understand things properly. So again, it was rejected.
Right. And then the third time that you applied, that was a success. So tell us a little bit what actually you made. I presume you did put this cover letter this time.
I did, that's right. This time I felt that visa consultants do not know enough because I spoke to a lot of them and they said, you can never go to the UK. But I spoke to people on Facebook. I saw people with a lot of visa rejections who had received their visas. And a lot of people told me that cover letter is a useful tool to explain your circumstances. So, and most people write cover letters, which is maybe a page or two long. But I ended up writing a cover letter, which was, I think, 12 pages long on A4. So I wrote a very long cover letter, and I discussed this with a lot of friends, and they all said that this is very detailed. You should not write this much. No one's going to read this. But I felt I needed to write a lot to be able to explain my circumstances. So I wrote in detail, and I mean, I took 2 months in writing that cover letter. So I wrote it, and I used to go through it every day and edit it, add things, remove things, and I did this for 2 months. So I worked really hard on that cover letter. And in a way, it changed my life because it allowed me to come here and have a career here.
Absolutely. And if you did not persevere and attempt the third time, then you probably would not be here today.
That's right. Yes.
So in terms of when you sought advice from people, you said that the visa consultants, were saying that you had no chance of coming to the UK. Were there other advice that you ignored that helped you to succeed? Because whenever people have struggled, they seek advice, and sometimes some advice needs to be ignored.
So I think the most important advice that I did not focus on earlier was taking the visa application seriously. So I did not take it seriously. I was not serious about it. I did not work hard on it. And it's a serious thing. You need to do proper homework. You need to work hard on it. And I just took it for granted and applied without proper homework. And that's where I struggled.
Then you came to the UK, and then you did your PLAB 2. Could you tell us a little bit about this experience when you sat PLAB 2?
Sure. So when I came to the UK, it was 1st December 2016. In Karachi that day, it was 36 degrees hot, and in the UK it was -6. So there was a difference of about 40 degrees that I went through, from really hot to really cold. So that was interesting. When I came here, I joined an academy for my PLAB 2. And for the first 2 weeks, all I did was eat, sleep, and study. Classes used to start very early in the morning, used to end really late at night. I used to come home, eat, and sleep. That's all I did for two weeks. After that, classes ended, and I studied on my own. But once classes ended, I studied in a very relaxed way. I studied at a slow pace. It was a lot of fun because PLAB 2 is a very different exam. It tests your approach more than anything else. The exposure to the British culture is very important for the exam. So I enjoyed my time for PLAB 2. I made a lot of friends and studied in a group, and I passed my exam very comfortably.
So that was a good experience then when you first came to the UK, even if it was very cold here.
I love the cold, so yeah, I enjoyed it.
So to give us a little bit of background, Naseer, when you were in Pakistan, how much have you worked in the system there?
Sure. So after graduating, I completed my 12-month mandatory internship. And after that, I worked for 18 months more. And that was because I was struggling with my visa applications. The plan was to come to the UK as soon as I complete my internship, but I had to wait nearly two more years because of the visa applications.
So when you were waiting for these 2 more years, were you still working or were you doing other things?
So I was working. When I was in Pakistan, in fact, even now, I've not been jobless even for a single day since graduation. So I've always had a job. Of course, I've taken annual leaves, but the day my job finishes, the next day I've had a different job always. So that I don't have any career gaps.
Mm.
Yes, I was working back home. When I was not getting my visa, I was very confused. I thought about taking the Pakistani post-graduation exam. I also thought about taking the MRCP one, but I just could not focus enough with my visa application in the pipeline. So I never took those exams, and I don't regret it because being a GP trainee, I don't need those exams.
Yeah. Did you ever thought about going to the US when you found that the second time your journey to the UK was bumpy?
No, I was sure that I wanted to come to the UK, and I wanted to try hard on this one pathway. So no.
And what is it that you thought the UK had that you wanted to actually be working in that system?
So I'll be honest. Throughout my med school, I wanted to come to the US because one of my paternal uncles is a doctor in the US, and he took the USMLE. So I always admired him, and I thought I would follow his footsteps, and I thought I would go for the USMLE. And in my first and second year of med school, I did study for the USMLE as well. Even in third year, I did. But it was very difficult to study for USMLE along with med school, and I could never do it properly. And again, I'll be very open here. I always felt that the USMLE was a very difficult exam, and I was not sure if I would be able to manage that, if I would be able to pass that. And I did not study much for the USMLE in my fourth and final year in med school. Um, just after finishing med school, I remember I was going to attend this career guidance seminar back home in Karachi. And back then, I didn't know that there was something called PLAB or the UK was a serious option. But I was going to attend this seminar in the morning. And the night before, I was at a relative's wedding, and I met the met the person who was going to be the speaker the next morning. And he asked me what my plan was, and I talked about the USMLE. And he asked me if I knew what PLAB was. And he had just passed his PLAB, and he was about to come to the UK. And he told me everything about PLAB. He told me that it's an easy exam. It takes less time to study. You only have to study clinical subjects. It takes less time, less money, less effort. And basically, I was sold. And the next morning, I attended his session, and there were a lot of different speakers for different exams. And I think that that day, the speaker for the USMLE made it sound like a very difficult and very hard exam. And he was like, I've done this, but I don't know if you guys can because it's a difficult exam. And the speaker for the PLAB exam was like, he was like, it's a very easy exam. If I can do it, so can anyone else. Uh, so I was inspired by that. And he didn't talk about how to pass the PLAB. He just convinced people that it was an easy exam. So I came home, I searched through Facebook groups, and found a lot of information. And I started working on my PLAB since then.
That career guidance even really changed the way actually you actually decided, and then from there you decided that was your goal to come to the UK and work. Tell me a little bit about this. When you were studying for PLAB 1 and PLAB 2, was there anything that you would advise other IMGs who are taking it now, other things that they focus too much on or wasting time on? What would you advise people?
So I still think PLAB 1 is a very easy exam. I see on Facebook that people think it's becoming a bit more difficult, a bit more challenging. So it is a professional exam, so it will test your knowledge, but it's still an easy exam. Since it tests your clinical knowledge, which is fresh after med school, I think soon after graduating is the best time to study for it and to take the exam. I mean, it does not mean that if you graduated a long time back, you cannot pass the exam. You can still pass the exam easily if you work hard, but it's easier if you're a fresh graduate. I think the best way to pass the exam is by taking it easy, like I did. I'll tell you how I studied for it. So I downloaded these questions in my phone that I had to go through. And I used to wake up in the morning, and before getting out of bed, I would go through 5 questions quickly. Uh, After getting out of bed, after getting fresh, I would go through 5 more. While having breakfast in the morning, I would go through 10 more. On my way to work, I would go through 20 more. After reaching the hospital, the consultant is not there yet, 5 more. In my lunch break, 50 more. So by the time I used to come back home, I was done with my daily target of 200 questions. And if I was not, I was done with most of it. So I would just sit down for half an hour, complete my daily goal of 200 questions, and that was it. So I never studied after 5 p.m. And as I've said many times before, I used to watch 3, 4, or 5 hours of TV every day. So that's how I studied for my PLAB 1. So I made it very easy for myself by studying on the go. And it's very easy to do that with mobile phones these days.
That's a great way of doing it because you integrate it with your work and then you don't have to actually spend too much time on doing these questions because a lot of people stress on will I have enough time? I'm really busy at work. But actually, when you're working, there are some dead times when you can actually use that, and you seem to be finding this time and snacking on these questions and managing to get your daily 200 questions. That's a really small way of doing it.
Yeah, and I know you're asking me questions, but here's a question for you. Do you think that it's possible to study for the AKT the same way, or do you think it needs more focus and you need to sit down and study properly?
So for the AKT, you can still do that. However, it depends on which placement you are. If you're on a busy rotation, such as A&E or in medicine, then it's more tricky to do that because AKT, you need to actually apply your knowledge and answer the question. So it's not just a test where you're assessing your knowledge, you need to be applying it. So you can do that as a supplement, but you still need to focus time on doing the question one after the other without being interrupted so that you know whether you can do it within the time frame. Because AKT, there's a component of time which is a challenge for many candidates. So I'd say you can still use your strategy, but also have chunks of time where you're not interrupted, dedicated to apply this knowledge and revising.
All right, fair enough. Thank you.
So I'll ask you questions about the PLAB 2 now, Naseer, because many of the candidates struggle with one of the domains, which is interpersonal skill, because coming from a different culture and being immersed in the UK culture, it can be a culture shock because the way medicine is practiced here in the UK is different. How did you find it when you found that the approach was completely different here?
You're absolutely right. I think it's a difference in the culture. So this is why I think it's very important to come to the UK and spend some time here before taking the exam so that you're exposed to the British culture before you take the exam. Uh, but I think the interpersonal skills makes the exam very easy because in your PLAB 2, you've got 18 stations. Each station has 3 domains where you're marked. So data gathering, management, and interpersonal skills, 4 marks for each. And passing score is roughly around 50%. So you need to get roughly 6 out of 12 in each station. So as long as you're nice and polite and kind and confident, you will score 4 out of 4 in interpersonal skills. And even if you mess up your management or data gathering, you'll still get maybe 1 or 2 out of 4. So if you add 4 plus 1 or 2 plus 1 or 2, you get 6 or 8 out of 12. So as long as you're nice and kind, it's very difficult to fail PLAB 2, I feel. And that's all you need. You just need to be nice and kind and have an ethical approach. And you learn that when you spend time in the UK, when you go out, when you meet people, when you talk to them, you hear these words, sorry, please, kindly, people being nice with you, joking with you. You learn that a lot at the academy as well, but you learn that by going out and meeting British people. So I think the British exposure helps with that more than anything else.
What I'd suggest we do now is let's talk about the next step. After you've done your PLAB and you've found out that you've passed, what did you do next?
So after I passed my PLAB 2, what I did was I launched my website. And I started receiving about, I think, dozens of messages every day. So I didn't have time to do anything else. And then I got busy with that. But a very useful thing to do during that phase is to do a clinical attachment if you're in the UK. You don't need a clinical attachment for a job, but it's useful because, again, it exposes you to the NHS and you see how things work in the system. So it's useful. And a lot of times when people do clinical attachments, at the end of that, they can get a job offer as well. So I think that's a useful thing to do. And obviously, you need to start applying for jobs as soon as you pass your PLAB too. And again, job applications is a serious thing. You need to work hard on that. Uh, People who are taking this for granted are struggling with job applications, but I know people who are working really hard at job applications. They apply for just one or two jobs in the day, and they spend the whole day, 8, 10 hours on working on one job application, and they end up with a lot of job offers.
So I understand that you've applied for 181 jobs and received 4 offers. Could you talk us through what you would have done differently if you knew from the experience now, if you were going to apply these jobs again?
So I would be more focused, and I would not apply for jobs that I did not want. So I was sure that I did not want certain jobs, but I still applied for them because I was not sure about how many job offers I would get. So I would make my job search a bit more focused, apply on only for the jobs that I'm interested in, work a bit hard on my job applications, only go for the interview if I want the job, because if I don't want the job, then it's unfair on the interview panel and it's unfair on other candidates as well. Uh, I suppose that's it.
Right. So, in terms of jobs that were interesting to you, what type of jobs were you looking for, Nasir?
So back then, I was looking for rotational jobs in medicine. I think A&E is also an interesting place to start at. Back then, my friends had told me that A&E is very difficult. It's a hard place to start at. So I did not go for A&E. I'm still not sure if I would advise newcomers to start in A&E, because A&E itself is a nice place to work at. You learn a lot. You feel very well supported. But the only thing is that the rota can be a bit harsh. It can be a bit overwhelming. I mean, I know I can do A&E for 4 months, but if I was told that I had to do A&E for 2 years, I don't know how I would feel about that. It would be difficult.
Yeah, I can relate to that because I did my A&E rotation in FY1, so that was the first year of working as a doctor. And as an FY1, the rota was not too bad. And I really enjoy it because you're the first person, the first doctor seeing that patient, diagnosing and treating. So it's a great experience and you learn straight away from your encounter. However, doing that for 1 year, 2 year, a decade, I couldn't see myself doing that, especially when I saw these consultants in the 50s having to do night shift, having to work over weekend. It was really tough. It was tough.
You're absolutely right. I remember one day going to work on a Saturday morning. It's at 7:30, so I reached a bit early. And I was passing by Costa, and I saw this consultant, this really senior consultant, standing in a line waiting for a coffee on Saturday morning at 7:30. And I thought, when I'm old, I don't want this life. I want to be in my bed at 7:30 on a Sunday morning. But a lot of people enjoy that. So it's a personal choice. If you enjoy that, that's a personal choice. And I think the A&E job itself, it's really good. I mean, seriously, I would love to work in A&E in the future, but not in the long run.
Yeah, I think there are opportunities for GPs to work in A&E. I know a few GPs who do 1 day a week and they really enjoy it because some people still like to see the acute and they want to make a difference in that way. Could you tell us how was your first day working in the NHS, Nasir?
It was very overwhelming. I remember because everything was new. I didn't know how to take bloods. I didn't know how to approach patients. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. And to be honest, I remember the first time a nurse approached me and asked me what my name was. And I said, my name is Dr. Khan. And she said, here we call people by their first names. So what is your first name? And I said, my name is Naseer. So, I mean, even those kind of things, they just come naturally now. But even that was an adjustment back then. And there were other things which felt new to me. For example, I saw consultants standing in the ward round and doing their jobs, and nurses sitting on the chairs. I was not used to that. because I was used to the back home, if a consultant comes during the ward round, everyone gets up from their chairs and the consultant has a seat. But that was new. But overall, it takes a while to get used to the system, to understand basic things like how to request investigations, how to chase investigations, how to do referrals to other departments. Um, so I think it's important to give yourself some time to. It's also useful if you've got IMG friends in the system to help you and guide you. That helps more than anything else. When I started my job, I did not have any IMG friends, so I struggled a lot. But here I am. I feel a lot more comfortable in the system now. And whenever I see someone new joining the system, especially in IMG, I go out of my way to help them as much as I can.
Yeah, I think it's very difficult, especially coming from a different system and working in the NHS. Um, when you said about small details like your name, people can actually take that because they're not used to it. They may think that, oh, this doctor is arrogant, or it's just a matter of because you don't really know the language people speak here and how they interact. Whereas probably in the Pakistan or in other Asian countries, there is a hierarchy, whereas here, people seem to be more friendly and informal in their way of communicating.
You're absolutely right. Everyone is equal, so it doesn't matter if you're an F1 or a consultant. So I really enjoy that in the system.
Right. You mentioned about when you were applying for jobs, you would have focused more on the jobs that you wanted. Your first placement, what was it in?
Renal medicine.
Renal medicine. Right. So you did get your medicine and rotation when you first started.
That's right. And I felt comfortable to work in renal medicine because back home in Pakistan, I worked in renal medicine for 18 months. So I understood the basics of dialysis, what UF is, how much water to take off during dialysis, and all of those things. So I felt comfortable starting in renal medicine. But having said that, it was still a completely different world, and it still took some getting used to.
Right. The other question I wanted to ask you is when somebody have like an interest in some specialties and they're applying as an IMG, sometimes it's easier to apply some of the jobs such as A&E, some of the medical jobs, sometimes in pediatric. If you're a little bit too selective, you can actually make the odd worse for you. So how would you actually advise people to go about hunting these jobs?
You're right. So I suppose starting in some departments can be easier than starting in other departments. For example, I feel that it's easy to start in geriatrics. It's not a bad job. Even starting in acute medicine is not bad. You're very well supported, just like A&E. A&E is a nice job as well, except for the rota. Psychiatry is not a bad job to start at. But yes, if you're choosing just 4 or 5 departments, you're limiting your options. And then a lot of people have restrictions about geographical location, so they only want a job in a certain part of the country for personal reasons. So that limits their options even further. And then a lot of people want jobs at a certain level, for example, just at F1 or maybe just at SD1. So again, that limits it further. So it's a completely personal choice. Uh, Depends on what you want, depends on how soon you want to start, whether you're willing to wait for 6 extra months to have the job of your choice, or if you want to start the next month, regardless of where you end up. So it's a completely personal choice.
When you started your first job then, with the visa, did you have any trouble with that then?
Not at all. So it was a pretty straightforward application, and no, I did not have any trouble at all.
And then you worked in as a SHO level, or which level were you working in?
Yeah, so I started at CT1 non-training level. So yes, that's SHO level.
Right. So how things actually developed from there after working in renal medicine, and you progress your career.
Yeah, so I worked in renal medicine for 6 months. By the end of those 6 months, I started to feel a lot more comfortable. Um, that job was nice because I had an educational supervisor and a clinical supervisor as well. Even though I was a non-trainee, I was treated like a trainee. I had a portfolio. I had an initial meeting. We set up PDPs. We used to go through those workplace-based assessments. We had a meeting at the end of the placement as well. So it was a very useful rotation, and I learned a lot from it.
That's great because not all hospital, not all trusts will actually give you the support to nurture you, and when you're actually getting job offers, you can actually negotiate to have study budgets, study leaves as well as a non-trainee. Some trusts will actually give it to you if you're awesome.
You're absolutely right. So, and it's best to plan your leaves as well, I think.
Yeah, yeah, that's one of the things that many doctors actually struggle. Um, you need to actually plan, and it can be tricky to be able to plan like if you want a weekend off until the rota has been finalized. So, in terms of working through the NHS and getting your feet through, what would you say was the main things that surprised you when you came here?
Um, Surprised me. That's a difficult question because I'm trying to think and I can't think of anything that surprised me. I suppose I would not call it a surprise, but I was happy to see how everyone was equal in the system. I was happy to see how organized and systematic things were. I enjoy the fact that people follow guidelines. Everything is done by the book. So I enjoyed all of that, but I would not say that anything surprised me. At least I can't think of any surprises right now.
I know some IMG doctors who come here and work are a bit surprised when they find that the interaction with patients is different. So back home they were having more of a paternalistic approach, whereas here it's more of a shared care where you discuss it with the patient and you also discuss it with relatives. Other things like when there are patients who need bloods, usually the nurse would be happy to do that, whereas here it's more the doctor who have to come in and do it.
Uh, to be honest, no, I don't feel surprised by any of that. I suppose because when I was studying for my PLAB too, I became familiar with all of this. But I suppose one thing which did pleasantly surprise me was the social care system that they have in this country because it's a welfare country. So, I mean, when I realized that people have carers going into their homes and helping them with basic things, I was pleasantly surprised by that. And I absolutely love this system where if someone cannot look after themselves at home, the government helps them with that. And then other things as well. I love the the occupational therapy department because again they go to patients' homes and workplaces and make arrangements for them. For example, if someone cannot do the stairs, they can even install a chairlift at their home. So I was surprised by that, and I think that's a beautiful system. And I honestly wish that we would have a similar system back home in Pakistan and even in other countries, India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka.
Yeah, one of the assets of the NHS is this multidisciplinary team where doctors work in collaboration with physio, with OT, with social worker, and you get a good package for the patient when they're discharged or even when they're being treated in community. So that's one of the great things about how things work here. Whereas in other countries where it may be private, so it's only the doctor who's actually recommending certain medical treatment, and then you don't have a holistic approach.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I miss those MDT meetings. When I was working in geriatrics, we used to do these MDTs. Everyone used to sit down together, the consultants, junior doctors, OTs, PTs, nurses, dietitians, and we used to discuss all the patients on the ward. And I know a lot of doctors find it boring, but the social aspect of care, I absolutely enjoyed that, and I love that. Um, I learned a lot while working in geriatrics. I learned this comprehensive geriatric assessment, and it helps me a lot even as a GP trainee now, especially when I do home visits. So I do CGAs for every patient, and that helps me in understanding where they are, what their needs are. So I think a geriatric rotation was very useful for me before starting my GP training now that I'm a GP trainee.
Yeah, geriatric gives you perspective when you care for these patients who live a really rich life, and you see how they have actually been cared for. And some of them are very lovely. They'll tell you some stories, and it's just warming conversation that you can have with these patients.
Geriatrics can be at times less busy as well. So whenever I had time on my geriatric ward, I used to talk to patients. I used to sit down with them and just listen to their stories. And I'm fascinated by history. So whenever I sit down with a patient, I ask them what the NHS used to be like 50, 60 years ago, how things were, for example, during World War II, how did they survive, what did they used to do, how things were before the NHS was here. And I learned a lot from listening to patients on the geriatric wards, and I really enjoyed my time there. And I feel if I was not a GP trainee, I would have. I mean, I was serious about geriatric training, and I still think about it. I find it interesting.
That's great. I really love that. So yeah, you can actually capture these moments because you're on the ward. You could actually engage with the patient and learn more from them. And it's also a bonus for them to have somebody listening to them, and you're learning something. So it's win-win really.
You're right. They love to tell stories, and I love to listen.
So in terms of your training now, you said that you're going to GPSC2. What rotations have you got next?
So I've got 4 month rotations. So I've got 3 rotations in my ST2: pediatrics, GP, and obs and gynae.
Okay, pediatrics, GP, and obs and gynae. That's a good set of rotation for GP training because pediatric is something we commonly see in general practice. As a male GP, having obstetric and gynae experience also help. So that's good. In terms of what made you choose GP training, Naseer? How did you come about going into GP training? Because you initially thought about medical.
That's right. So I always wanted to be a medical consultant, but after I was done with my PLAB 2, even during my PLAB 2 when I was at the academy, I didn't know that there was something like a GP. I didn't know the system here. But a lot of people told me that the way that I am, the way that I talk, and my personality is well suited to be a GP. So then I started finding out information about how things work, how the system works, what exactly is a GP, what does a GP do. And I really like the idea. I love the concept. And I like the continuity of care. And in my ST1, I have done 8 months of general practice. So I have a bit of an idea of how things run at a GP practice. Um, so I like the idea. When I started working in the NHS, I did a taster week, which did not tell me a lot, but at least it exposed me to the system. I knew at least a bit about how things run, and I really enjoyed it, and I loved it. I spoke to a lot of GP trainees. I spoke to GPs, and I knew it was for me. I know I would really enjoy working as a GP. I have enjoyed my 8 months of GP rotation in my SD1.
That's great that you managed to get a taster week out of your work, and it's always good to actually speak with the people who are in the job and see for yourself and experience it because GP training is a great career option. I like to remind people about the variety that you see, the continuity of care, and you can also carve your career and go into a special interest if you want to. And so there are GP trainees who actually specialize and do aesthetics, some do dermatology, some do a bit of obstetric and gynecology. So there are different career paths, and then once you qualify as a GP, you can work in the hospital as well. You can work in clinics, endless opportunities with GP.
You're absolutely right. So it gives you a lot of options, and you can be a portfolio GP as well. You can do other things as well. So that's another option which attracts me.
Right. In terms of portfolio, I can see that you're already developing an interest, and you dedicated some weekends doing these career guidance session for IMGs, for NHS doctors. If you can tell us a little bit about where do you see this Naseer Journey blog going? Because it started initially with your experience with PLAB 2 visa rejection. Now it's developing into a bank of resources for doctors who are coming to work in the UK, going on the training ladder.
Yes, thank you. So to be honest, I don't know where it's going. So far, it's just documentation of my journey. So whatever I've done, I've documented there, and I help people in light of what I've done. For example, after I passed PLAB, I was guiding people for PLAB. Then, when I entered GP training, I decided that I found it very easy, and I thought I would help people with that. Now that I'm almost done with my first year of GP training, now I look back and help people with that, how to get through their first year. Once I pass my AKT and CSA, I would help people with that. So one small step at a time. I don't know where Naseer's journey would be in 5 or 10 years from now, but I would like to uh, think of it in a way that I would work as a portfolio GP, so part-time. And the rest of my time, I would in some way give to career guidance. So far, whatever I'm doing is completely non-commercial. So I don't know if I'll ever make it commercial. If I end up being a portfolio GP, I'll have to make it commercial. But I don't know where it's going. I don't know. I might end up working as a full-time GP. I might not work as a portfolio GP. I don't know. But what I do know is that I enjoy helping people. So I'll continue doing that. And I'll continue helping them in light of my own experiences. So I'll continue doing that.
That's great that you have this dedication of helping others and serving them. And this is something that rarely concerns you. And when we actually got in touch about this interview, one of the first things you said is this interview needs to be helpful for other people. So tell me a little bit about what common pitfalls do you see IMG doing that they should be aware of, Naseer?
At what step?
Probably at step when they are hunting for jobs or when they're applying to come to the UK.
So when they're trying to come to the UK, I think the first thing they need to do is to make a roadmap, to make a proper plan. Because I talk to a lot of people. A lot of them have since then come to the UK and started working here, but a lot of them are still planning their IELTS and OET, and they never took these exams because they never made a roadmap. So I think it's important to plan things. It's important to know when you're going to take your exams at any level, whether it's AKT or CSA or if it's PLAB 1, you need to know when to take the exam. And the same goes for your visa application. So I made this mistake as well. I did not plan things properly. So I think we make this mistake of not planning things properly. Again, when applying for jobs, I think a lot of us don't take the job applications seriously. We don't work hard on them. On the other hand, as I said, I know IMGs who've spent 8 or 10 hours on one job application. And then they end up getting job offers. So I think it's important to be organized, to plan things well, And you learn that with experience and with trial and error.
That's some great advice here, folks. So, yeah, you do need to plan and take things seriously. The money is in planning. When you plan and you have a roadmap, you will get there. So, I'd like to ask you a little bit about life in the UK now. So, as you've settled now in the UK, and how do you find life of a doctor, striking a balance?
I think working hours in the UK are not bad. So on average, we work somewhere between 40 and 48 hours per week. So that's not bad at all. Because back home, I used to work around 80 hours per week. So it's nearly half of what we did back home. Most of the times, weekends and nights are off, depending on what rotation we're in. So we can do whatever we like. For example, if someone likes to go out, they can do that. You can go out and meet friends. But I think it's important to have a healthy balance and to include activities in your life which interest you. And that could be anything. For example, I like career guidance, so I have this in my life. I also love Netflix, so I watch a lot of TV shows. I love FIFA on PlayStation, so I do a lot of that. Uh, but everyone has their own interests. I listen to a lot of music as well. I spend a lot of time on YouTube, but I do other things apart from working, and I think that's important to stay sane.
Yeah, I think it's very important to keep doing other activities that you still enjoy outside of medicine because sometimes people can get sucked in by the work and they don't really live life outside of medicine. I've noticed that you've been posting some of the pictures of some dishes that you've cooked. Do you enjoy cooking, Nasir?
I absolutely love it, and I think I have this in my genes because my dad loves to cook, and all of my dad's brothers love to cook, and my dad is a better cook than my mom. Um, and I'm learning from my dad, and I absolutely love to cook. I enjoy cooking. I enjoy experimenting in the kitchen, um, but I'm still learning.
Yeah, yeah. So that's great. That you've got these activities. Do you also do some running as well?
Yeah. I've been running on and off since 2014 for the last 6 years now. And I'll tell you why I started this. So over a period of time, I started gaining weight. And in 2014, I felt that it was just enough was enough, and I had a lot of weight to lose. And I was reading Sachin Tendulkar's autobiography back then, and I read that he lost about 20 kgs in 10 days, and that was intense. 20 kilograms in 10 days. So that inspired me to make a start. So I ended up losing about 10 kilograms in 2 months. And throughout the year, I lost 16 kilograms, and that was just by exercising. So I used to do running for 1 hour and 45 minutes every day, regardless of how busy I was, regardless of what my day was like. So I did this every single day for 2 months, regardless how I was feeling physically or mentally. Uh, and I was careful about my diet as well. So I ended up losing a lot of weight. I did gain back a lot of it when I came to the UK during my PLAB 2 phase because I didn't have proper meals. But then again, I've been exercising a lot and I've been losing a lot of it. Because of all this running and playing a lot of football in my med school days, I've got very weak knees. So now I have to be careful with my runs. I know I'm very young, but still, I've got these really weak knees. Um, so I do run still. For example, this month, out of 18 days, I've ran on 14 days. So I try to do as much as I can.
That's very good that you've managed to keep up what you've done in med school. And running is something I really enjoy doing. And I also run, but not as far as you do. That's quite intense. 1 hour and 45 minutes per day.
Yeah,
Wow.
that was back then. Now it's just 30 to 45 minutes a day.
If you enjoy running, there's a book by Phil Knight, the founder of Nike. I think you will enjoy reading that book. So the name of that book is Shoe Dog. That's a really good book. Tells you the story of that founder who actually started Nike and his experience in life and discovering and traveling. So it's a really good book. I'd highly recommend you read that. In terms of reading, then, what are the books that you've read that has changed your life?
A lot of autobiographies have changed my life. So, and I started reading them, I think, during the last 5, 6 years. In my childhood, I started reading, I read a lot of Sidney Sheldon. I read a lot of Harry Potter. I mean, I've read all the Harry Potter books multiple times, and I'm still a huge fan of Harry Potter. I've read a lot of Dan Brown books. I love Dan Brown. Apart from that, I've read a lot of autobiographies of people who inspire me. A lot of sportsmen, some politicians, some entrepreneurs. And I feel there's a lot to learn from successful people. Sometimes it can be just small things. Here's an example. So there's this footballer, Gary Neville, who's a Manchester United football legend. So he wrote in his book that his father had this philosophy of attack the day. So he used to wake up at 3 in the morning and go to work at 4 in the morning so that he could come back at 12, 8 hour standard day, and spend time with his family and his kids and help them. So he used to start his day very early at 3 in the morning just so that he could make the best time of his day with his children. And he had 3 children. Gary and Phil Neville ended up playing for Manchester United, and his daughter ended up becoming a professional, I think, a netball player for the UK and won some medals at the Olympics. So this strategy of attack the day, I think it's a nice strategy, waking up early, starting your things early so that you get done with your things early, you don't procrastinate, and you have a lot of time at the end of the day then to yourself.
Yeah, that's a very good advice. Starting the morning and making sure that you do what's important in the morning, get it out of the way, so you free your evening. So what time do you usually wake up, Nasir?
It varies a lot, but I usually like to wake up around 6. It depends on what rotation I'm in as well, so that makes a lot of difference. But if things are if I have a stable rotation, then I wake up at 6 without an alarm.
Before we wrap up now, I'd like to ask you, Nasir, who is the most interesting person you've met?
Um, I don't. That's a difficult question. But I would say the person who inspires me the most and the person who I've learned the most from is my dad. I've learned a lot from him. Everything that I know today is from him, whether it's about cooking or about strategy in life and how to go about life. I mean, I've ever since I was young, he used to ask me, "What is the purpose of life?" But when I was a really small child, and I didn't know how to answer that. And my answer has changed over the period of time as I've grown up. And now I feel I know this is a philosophical thing and it's a very personal thing, but I think there is no purpose to life. I think it's completely random, but you can give any purpose to your life that you want. For example, the purpose that I've given to my life is to be a doctor and to help others as much as I can. But it's something that I've decided for myself. You can give your life any purpose that you want.
That's very powerful. Yeah, sometimes people find it difficult to know what's their meaning in life. But actually, if you reframe it into you give meaning to your life by what you do, then you can lead a
Yes.
purposeful life. So tell us a little bit about your dad then. What was your dad working as? And because he seemed to be very close to you and has influenced you a lot.
That's right. And actually, he was calling me during this interview. So that's why we had the disturbance. So yes, I've always been very close to my dad, and I remember when I was very young, he used to tell us that he's a friend and not a dad, and that's how he's been since the beginning with all three of us. So I've got two siblings, so he's close to all of us. Um, I've always been able to talk to him. I can always tell him anything. And again, this is very personal, but I remember when I was very young, he used to tell me that whenever you grow up and you have your girlfriends, you can tell me about them. So you don't have to hide anything. So he was always very open, very friendly. He used to discuss things with us, even when we were children. He used to discuss his business with us. He uh, and another thing that I really liked was that whenever we had to make a decision at home, he would discuss it and we would do voting and everyone would have an equal vote and we would discuss things, we would talk about things. So I learned to talk and I learned to think rationally from him.
So it sounds to me your dad actually treated you from an early age as same level and actually got you to reason and question you and making sure that you got involved in what the family decided.
Yes, that's right. And he had a very busy life when I was growing up in my early teenage. But I remember that every single day after coming back home, he used to play cricket with me and my brother because we were crazy about cricket back then. So I remember his routine was really busy, but still he used to come home at 5 or 6 and play cricket with us for an hour and then do the rest of the things that he had to. And now when I look back, that was one of the most precious times of my life. So that and the time doesn't come back. So I'm sure he's very happy about the fact that he was really busy, but he still took out an hour every day and played with us. Yeah, I really enjoy that when I look back.
That's great. Yeah, I think we all have these memories that we still cherish, and it's good to have these memories because we don't want to live life with regrets. Many people actually find it difficult working as a doctor, having to choose between spending time with the family and working. So it can be very difficult, and it's important that you manage to strike this balance. So before we wrap up now, I think it's important that we let people know about your blog, which is helping thousands of doctors. And you've also recently done a webinar session about application for GP, which got more than 7,000 views and loads of questions. So do you have any final thoughts or any asks for the audience, Naseer?
Um, yeah, thank you so much, and thank you for having me as well. I just have one request. I think when we come to the UK, we get very busy in our own lives and our own careers, our own struggles, and in our own journey, and we get busy with our training applications. We get busy in our everyday life. But I only have one request from people who are working here to look back and help people in light of your own experience. So, for example, if you found IELTS or OET a very difficult exam and now you're done with it, then please look back and help others who are struggling with it. And same goes for every step of the way: PLAB 1, PLAB 2, job applications, training applications, membership exams. So, for example, if you've recently found a job and others are struggling with it, please look back and help others. And I think this is why I actually love the UK because people do that. People go out of their way to help others, and a lot of people went out of their way to help me. This is why I try to help others as much as I can. So I just have this one request that I'll encourage people to take some time out, look back and help others and try to remember how you felt when you were struggling at the same step and just help others with the same.
Yeah, I think it's important to pay it forward. Once you achieve something and other people can learn from that, it's important that you pay it forward and help others. This is how we elevate the community and help each other as doctors. And in terms of if you want resources, I'd suggest you go and have a look at Naseer Journey's blog. So Can you tell us, just to clarify, what's the website? I'll put it in the link below.
Sure. So the website is naseersjourney.com. That's Naseers journey.com. And you can also find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn using the same address, Naseer's Journey, and YouTube as well.
Thank you very much for taking the time today, Naseer. I really appreciate you sharing your stories and your experience. I'm sure this will help a lot of people and inspire a lot of people who want to come and work in the UK.
Thank you so much for having me. And to be honest, you yourself are doing a lot of amazing work. You're helping a lot of people. You go out of your way to help others. You've helped me as well. So you do keep up the good work. And thank you so much for having me.